For many decades, the generational cycle of poverty has impacted America's youth.
And how the history of redlining has really created and continues to create neighborhoods that are deprived of resources, which then result in an overrepresentation of youth from those neighborhoods of being involved in the delinquency system. And so, one area that we've really been looking at a lot is the importance of play as a form of healthy development. And so I think a lot of us during COVID, when we were like all confined to our houses, realized how important it was to have space to go into our backyards, go to parks, go for walks, be out in nature when we couldn't all be together. And so a lot of what would they refer to as park equity conversations started kind of taking place around COVID because people who were in public housing didn't have those same types of spaces to be able to be out and exercise and to stay healthy as people who had backyards and access to parks did. But Redline really kind of built neighborhoods, right, where there are food deserts, which are next to toxic waste and with lead paint and lead in people's waters, and also not within a 10-minute walk to a park for healthy development. And then when there are parks in some of these neighborhoods, they're under-resourced. So they might not have tennis courts, they might not have water fountains, they might not have trees and shade, which makes enjoying the park better. And they also are over-policed. It's more likely that there's going to be a police cruiser sitting in some parks rather than others. And it kind of goes back to redlining.
Between food insecurity, unstable housing, and lack of educational funding, children living below the poverty line experience hardships that other children don't have to experience.
I believe there are a lot of distinct correlations, and that's because poverty can lead, it opens the door to crime. Why? Because it's illegal to steal a carton of eggs and a loaf of bread from your nearby supermarket, right? It's illegal. So when you're hungry, though, and you don't have the resources, and there's no one you think that's around that you can ask, and you find yourself sticking somebody up on the corner, or you know what I mean, you get into those situations because of your empty belly and not because you intend to harm anyone. And not, so these situations a lot of people, or young people specifically, find themselves encountering because of their lack. It's directly related to their lack and not because they just want to go out and start trouble.
These cycles of poverty also nurture an environment that creates another harmful cycle, the cycle of youth committing crimes.
So they sort of, they move with the wrong people, they're not at home. And then I see a lot of cases where clients are just victims of peer pressure. They get that first charge and then they get really scared, like, wait, if I'm an adult, this is a 20-year sentence. I'm like, yeah, if you're an adult, this is a 20-year sentence, but you're in juvenile court, so we can take it easy.
While these kids are growing up, their minds are impacted by what they see. These children, who don't have fully developed brains, are influenced by their surroundings, which then goes on to impact the rest of their lives.
And so when you take a young person out of their home and you put them in a detention center where they tell you what time to get up, what to eat, when to shower, when you can brush your teeth, who you're going to be friends with, and when everything is monitored, you don't get to develop in those ways because you don't have any responsibilities and you don't get to figure out what you're good at and you don't get to develop into the best version of yourself. And so we can really do a lot of damage because this is such an important time in adolescent development, and we can really do damage by overcorrecting for behavior that a lot of youth are just going to grow out of.
Children who were once great kids, being in clubs, doing activities they care about, those things are taken away from them once they go into the system of committing crime.
The kids I represented were brilliant and resilient. They had great parents. They were, they excelled at all different types of, clubs and sports and interests and hobbies. They were artists. They sang, they danced, they, produced music, they wrote rhymes. They were really talented. And so I think that was kind of the just that they're like not really given always the space to thrive and just be who they are. And then once they get touched by the system, a lot of times we start taking away a lot of those things that they were excelling in, right?
These children believe that crime is normal and that it's just a part of life. According to research done by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, in a randomized experiment, they found that out of their total of 279 teens, they were arrested 998 times in the pre- and post-program period for charges ranging from shoplifting to attempted murder.
He got into a fist fight with someone that he knew. That person was intoxicated and fell off of the curb on the street and smacked the back of his head and received what they call a contre coup injury, which is when your brain shifts in your head. It's what happens like when people die from skiing accidents. Like it's like a hard fall back. But he was charged with homicide. I think the day after his 14th birthday, he was arrested and charged with homicide. And so I represented him for a year, and he's, I think a pretty good indication of like what's possible, right?
We classify these crimes into 3 categories: violent crimes, property crimes, and other crimes. The current system in place make it so that children who have offended have difficulty throughout their adult lives.
Now, and he's trying to become a firefighter in this charges, and this is now 15 years ago, and this charge is still following him. And I don't think that that's fair. I think he's more than the worst thing anybody can, all of us, right? Or more than the worst thing someone could say about us. But when you get charged, that's what you become, right? Like he's someone who committed an aggravated assault 15 years ago, and now, even though he's somebody's dad and somebody's husband, the decision as to whether or not he can serve his community is going to be based on something he did when he was 14 years old.
It's not an easy problem to address either. When these youth start getting violent with the people who are supposed to be helping them, it pushes the caretakers away.
Essentially written a kill list, an extended manifesto about all the people that he would like to kill, and that I was specifically named as a person that he wanted to kill.
It also isn't easy for people to get involved in making change in these children's lives because people simply don't know.
Direct experience with students that are suspected or known to be involved with gangs is there's little to no mention or discussion about that whatsoever. That is an area, even students I've had a good connection with or that I feel like are open and honest, they don't go.
In the state of Maryland, the youth justice system tries their best to work in the children's best interest.
Problematic. In my mind and all of the research that I've done, it proves that the statistical data is in place to tell us what children are most prone to futures of violence, futures of lack, futures of poverty, and all of that. And if we know based on the circumstances that they're being born into that this is a likelihood in their future, it's our job not to wait, but to intervene and make sure that we are getting them the resources that they're going to need. Why? Because the data proves that they're going to need it. So instead of waiting, I believe if we were all to about face and look at another approach, which is to see what's coming down the pipeline for them. Why? Because they can't see it. And to put those anchors in place, those supports in place so that they don't have to get there. So rehabilitation is important, yes, but it should be reserved for those we've missed, and it shouldn't be a safety net for us because we just think, oh, it's in place when they do need it. The objective is to erase the need for it by preventing the harm in the first place.
Unfortunately, the lack of federal government support and capitalistic ventures hinder any tangible result with youth delinquency and crime and poverty. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, Philip Alston, highlighted the practice during a recent visit to the country. In his report, he says that the criminal justice system is effectively a system for keeping the poor in poverty while generating revenue. In the United States, many jurisdictions rely on fees and fines for revenue for the criminal justice system and for other programs. This approach is highly regressive as it tends to place the greatest financial burden on the low-income people whose cases make up the largest share of many courts' dockets.
I think I don't know how many people will agree, but absolutely. I do believe that when the government steps in to help families who are in the middle of struggling, that is help. And we're seeing that right now with the child tax credit, which didn't make it into the new year. That gave a lot of families some breathing room, right? Because a lot of the times, especially right now, I think your generation is seeing this maybe for the first time. I'm not certain, but just the state our government is in, just being in heavy debt to other nations and not being able to supply what the people in our own nation need is problematic, right? So when a family is, right now we're dealing with heavy inflation. Prices are through the roof, but people's salaries are pretty much the same. A lot of people have lost their jobs leading up to the pandemic, following the pandemic. And so a lot of circumstances have seriously and severely shifted. And because we're not addressing that, the fact that the cost of living has literally quadrupled in the past couple of years, people are going without and they're lacking. And I believe that if the government were to have it, and I don't believe they don't have it, I'm just saying that if they were to decide to answer and be available with resources and tools and supports, that it would be a help to a vast majority of the people who are struggling. To all, maybe not, but to those who are struggling, I do believe the government should be ready and willing to help and to aid them. But I grew up in heavy violence, heavy dysfunction, if you can name it, it's been in my household, right? Just complete dysfunction. Roaches, rats, lack of food. I was in the foster care system. Just you name it. It was terrible. One time there was a helicopter circling the block with this big old light. I felt like it lit up the whole neighborhood. It probably only lit up our block and maybe the next one. But just finding that fascinating until I realized it was looking at our house. I'm living with criminals and people who are out committing crimes and coming home for their safety, and the cops are banging on the door and running through the house. Like, I grew up in that, and I will say that if it weren't for different moments in my own life where I was exposed to other people and other ways of living, that would have been or become my future. Strong correlations between crime and poverty, because the crime is something committed to address the poverty.